All right, so after a few days of using Seedance 2.0, I think I finally figured out what this thing is actually good for. But more importantly, what it's not. I've been building real scenes with it, going back and forth, breaking it a little bit, and seeing what actually holds up. And honestly, it's not exactly what I thought it was gonna be. If you're new here, I'm Khalil from AI for Real Life. I've been deep in the AI filmmaking space, testing tools, breaking workflows, rebuilding them, and figuring out what actually holds up when you try to use this stuff in real projects. And in the last video, I jumped in and showed you how to use Seedance 2.0. But this one is different because this is after I actually had a chance to really build with it and test it out. So first of all, let's get this out of the way. My first impressions about this model, they were correct. This model is really impressive. You can get really solid sequences out of it, you can get strong character consistency, and you can get really clean action shots. And all that stuff that you're seeing online, it definitely holds up. There's no question about that. But after building out that first rough scene that you saw in the last video, the next question for me was, all right, what am I missing here? Because I knew that I had barely scratched the surface at that point. And honestly, some of the biggest improvements didn't even come from me. They came from you guys in the comments. So let's go ahead and jump into Higgsfield and I can show you what I mean. All right, so one of the biggest things that actually helped me immediately was understanding how to use elements and references inside of Higgsfield. I didn't realize at first that if you hover over the image on the elements panel, you can actually set it as a start frame, end frame, or a reference. I couldn't find that, and that actually changes a lot because now you're not just prompting the start and end frame and you can actually use it in a traditional setup. And the second thing that somebody told me was about using previous video generations as references, because instead of starting from scratch every time, you can take a clip that you already generated and you can feed that back into the model so that it has context. So it's not just guessing from zero anymore or just using the prompt or even a starting frame. It has the video to guide it. It's very interesting. So I messed around with it a little bit and it worked out pretty well. But to be honest with you, I still like image to video better, but I don't know, let me know in the comments if you found this video feature as an element to be really something that is very useful. Now, this next thing, it actually caught me a little bit off guard because I thought that I had, for a second, a prompting problem when it came to using Seedance 2.0 over here in Higgsfield, but I actually had a reference problem. So, for example, I've been using this bar image as my location reference for a while. I mean, before Seedance even came out or Kling came out, I've been using this reference image as the location for a long time. And it's solid in its own right because it just defines the space. So naturally, I brought it into Seedance, thinking that it would lock everything in. And it did lock in the location, but the output, it kept looking flat. So even though I was prompting for cinematic angles and lens details and depth, it still felt just like a location. And that's when it kind of clicked for me and I tried a couple different things. And what it seems like to me is that the model isn't just listening to your prompt, obviously, it's listening to your references. But the thing that it seems like to me is that it's putting more weight on your references and elements, which makes sense, right? Because it wants to keep the consistency based on what you're locking in. So if your references are flat, if your elements are flat, then your output is going to feel flat. So what I ended up doing was sort of rebuilding the location, but this time I did it a little more cinematically. So what I started doing was going back and generating the storyboard style shots with the different angles, foreground elements, depth of field, the lens looks baked in, all that kind of stuff. And I haven't been using that technique for a while just because things have shifted a little bit, but I went back to Old Faithful and tried it out again. And then what I ended up doing was after extracting the different frames that I liked and the different looks that I like, I used those alongside of the location and that changed everything. So if your scene feels flat right now, it might not always be your prompting, it might be your references or your elements. Something to think about. Now, this next thing, this was actually the real big test for me because we already know what Seedance can do with action. That's not really the question. The real question is what happens when you push it on dialogue. So I ran a series of tests and compared it directly against what I've been using, which is Kling 3.0 Omni. So some of the prompts were identical and others I was just doing some testing. That's what I do, right? And honestly, it was generally good, but it lacked depth. It looked right, but it didn't really feel right. And that's a subtle difference, but it's a huge one because you can have correct lip syncing and lip movement and decent expressions and even have some emotion, but if it doesn't feel like a performance, then it falls apart fast. Now, to be fair, there were some moments that worked, and in some different clips that I can't show you from client work, it worked. An argument scene, different things like that. It can hit certain emotions and it can get close, but when it comes to nuanced dialogue and those micro expressions, that's where it starts to fall off in my book. So it may be something that I have to get better at with my own prompting and figure out the ways to use this tool better, but that's my honest take on it right now. So if you're building real dialogue scenes, Kling still has the edge, at least for now, for me. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just about quality, it's about the workflow. See, Seedance is more expensive. It just is what it is. There's no way around that. But a lot of times you get your shot faster. So in essence, instead of running quite a few prompts to get to the same point, Seedance wastes less time. But in my opinion, Kling gives you better performances and it's less expensive. But with Kling, you might have to run multiple generations. Well, you will have to run multiple generations most time because the dialogue drifts, or they just can't say a certain word for some reason, or just something goes off the rails. And then you're chasing that shot. But when it finally hits, it hits, which is amazing when it does. But with Seedance, it tends to hold things together better from my testing. And you get something usable quicker, but the acting is not quite there yet. It's not terrible. It's much better than it was, 6 months ago and on older models. But to pass that whole uncanny valley thing, it just doesn't quite get there for me. So what I started thinking about was maybe this isn't an either or situation, which is how I tend to think about a lot of these things. Maybe it's a pipeline where you can use Seedance for scene building and movement and getting those usable shots, because you can get there faster. And then you can extract the frames that you need and move those into Kling for those scenes that you really need the performance on. So instead of choosing one tool, you're really assigning roles, which is kind of the name of the game for me. It's spending this time and knowing these tools so that when I'm in the middle of a project, I can say, okay, let me use this tool for this because that's probably going to work better. And let me try this tool for this. Or if you get stuck, you have an idea of what can do what. And that's really why I do explore some of these tools, but try to stay with my core tools. And this whole thing at least is something else that I noticed, which is not something that's extremely new, but it is something that I noticed again, and which is the whole shot harvesting thing. Because Seedance doesn't give you just what you asked for, or it doesn't always nail it the first time. It gives you variations, especially if you're doing multi-shot sequences. It gives you extra shots, different angles that you didn't really think about. And that's where this and tools like Kling are really, really useful. You can put in a prompt, tell it what you want it to happen, and kind of see where it runs. But at the same time, this can be expensive experimentation. And it's not perfect. It gives you ideas, but it still needs direction, because you're going to have continuity issues. You're going to have extra characters popping in, weird movement, and wardrobe problems. Like in my beach scene, for example, I'm in there and I'm doing my best to kind of knock stuff out, but I don't always want to spend 20, 30 minutes on a prompt, right? That's how we all are. We're busy. We have things that we're trying to get done, and we're trying to fit this in between the next scene, the next shot, the next thing for work, whatever it may be. But that'll cost you, because for this shot, I just mentioned that they had on board shorts and it just made stuff up. So that part was on me, because the model is going to fill in the gaps whether you want it to or not. So what I ended up doing was going back, rebuilding their post sheets, wearing the board shorts, feeding that in as a reference, and it cleaned that part up. So with this whole thing, the workflow becomes generating, finding what works, ignoring what doesn't, extracting frames and feeding them back in and repeating that process. And this is one process. This is not for every story. It's not for every scene. But if you're trying to move the story along and explore a little bit, this can really work out really well. And what I'm finding lately, especially with Kling 3.0 and Seedance 2.0, is that I'm crafting starting frames a lot less using Nano Banana or whatever image model. And I'm relying more on these models, these video generation models, to actually build the next scene. Because when you're using the model's own output as your next input, you're naturally going to get better consistency and the look and feel, because it's coming from that same model, right? So instead of trying to mimic that look from outside using Nano Banana, I go in, I take the clip, If I find a scene that I really love, I take that clip, take a screenshot of it, upscale it with Topaz Bloom or whatever, and then I bring it back in and use that as a starting frame. Or I can take that, drop it into Nano Banana, make some adjustments, and use it as a starting frame. And that has been really, really clutch for me with these new models, just trying to figure out how to use that model to get me to that next frame, that next set, that next look. So it's definitely been a shift on how I've been working. So overall, here's my take on Seedance 2.0 right now. It's really strong at action and consistency and getting usable shots quickly, but it's still catching up when it comes to like the nuanced acting, the deeper performances, and like the whole dialogue realism thing. Where it really shines is helping you build those scenes faster and giving you material to work with. It's very similar to what I was doing with Kling, but it really shines with putting together sequences. There's a lot less that I've got to cut out than I was doing with Kling. But like I said, nuanced acting, dialogue, Kling wins on that. So it's very interesting. So that's my experience after actually just sitting with it, testing it, breaking it, rebuilding with it, and trying to figure out where it actually fits. So if you've been using Seedance, please let me know what you're seeing. Let us know what you've been seeing, especially on the dialogue side, because that's where things get interesting. And let us know in the comments what you've been finding, because I learned a lot in that last set of comments on what I was missing and what could make this a better tool for myself. And if you got any value out of this, go ahead and subscribe. That would be helpful to me. And if you're interested in going deeper into this whole craft and just getting guides or joining a community with courses and breakdowns and these workflows, check out the links in my description, and I guess I'll just catch you on the next one.